The first disappearance went unnoticed, just a passing comment at the diner about Old Man Hargrove not showing up for his usual coffee. But when the Thompson boy vanished the next night, the town of Black Hollow began to whisper. By the third disappearance, the whispers turned to fear. Each victim had last been seen at dusk, and by midnight, they were gone without a trace. No signs of struggle, no forced entry, just empty beds and cold cups of tea left untouched. Sarah Mercer, a reporter for the Black Hollow Gazette, had grown up hearing the town's old superstitions, but she'd always dismissed them as folklore. Now, with fear gripping the community, she couldn't ignore the pattern. Her investigation led her to the town's crumbling archives, where she stumbled upon a faded ledger from 1923. The entries detailed a similar string of vanishings, all occurring at the stroke of midnight. At the bottom of the page, scrawled in ink so dark it looked fresh, were the words, "When the clock tolls 12, the judge comes for the wicked." Digging deeper, Sarah found references to an ancient entity known as the Hollow Judge, a spirit said to descend upon the town once every century to weigh the souls of its inhabitants. Those deemed unworthy were taken, their fates unknown. The last recorded judgment had been exactly 100 years ago, to the day. As she closed the ledger, a cold draft swept through the archives, extinguishing her lantern. In the darkness, she could have sworn she heard the faint sound of a clock ticking. Sarah's boots echoed through the hollow silence of the abandoned library, the air thick with the scent of decaying paper and dust. The flickering light from her flashlight barely pierced the darkness as she traced her fingers along the cracked spines of forgotten books. She had come here on a hunch, following whispers of a hidden text that held the town's darkest secrets. Behind a loose panel in the farthest shelf, her fingers brushed against something cold and leather-bound, a manuscript, its cover etched with symbols that made her skin prickle. As she carefully unfolded its brittle pages, her breath hitched. The ink was faded but legible, detailing a ritual performed centuries ago to imprison a malevolent spirit known as the Vera, a creature that judged souls with brutal efficiency. The manuscript warned of a cycle. Every 100 years, the Vera would return to claim 7 victims, their fates sealed by midnight's chime. The most chilling revelation. The countdown had already begun. Sarah's fingers trembled as she read the names of past victims, each marked with the same symbols now appearing around town. Closing the manuscript, she sensed movement in the shadows. A figure stood just beyond the dim light, tall, cloaked, and utterly still. The Watcher. She had heard the rumors, a silent guardian who trailed those who dared uncover the truth. His presence was a confirmation. She was on the right path, but the weight of his gaze promised danger. Racing home, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling of eyes on her back. The manuscript's final words haunted her, "The Vera sees all, and the marked shall not escape." She barely slept that night. Her dreams filled with whispers and the sound of a distant clock ticking toward midnight. The Watcher's presence loomed larger with each passing hour, his cryptic notes appearing on her doorstep, each one a grim reminder time was running out. Sarah clutched her coat tighter as she stood outside the police tape, staring at the ghastly sight in the alley. Mark's body lay twisted on the cold pavement, his wide eyes frozen in terror. The symbols carved into his flesh were jagged, deliberate, something far beyond human cruelty. Her stomach turned as she recognized them from the manuscript, a language of the damned, warnings scribed in blood. The police chief brushed her off when she tried to explain, his skepticism hardening into irritation. "Kids playing pranks," he muttered, but the pallor of his face betrayed him. The townsfolk whispered in hushed tones, their fear growing like a shadow stretching under the setting sun. Yet, no one wanted to listen to Sarah's ramblings about ancient spirits and curses. She was just the local journalist with a flair for the dramatic, wasn't she? That night, alone in her apartment, Sarah pored over the manuscript again, her fingers trembling as they traced the symbols matching Mark's wounds. The page warned of a sacrifice, a soul weighed and found wanting. She couldn't shake the creeping dread that he had been judged and chosen. As rain lashed against her window, she flinched at every creak of the old building. Then, a knock. Not at her door, but at the glass. Her breath hitched. Through the rain-streaked pane, a figure stood motionless in the alley below, its face hidden beneath a tattered hood. The Watcher. Its presence sent a jagged chill down her spine. It tilted its head, as if amused by her fear, before vanishing into the storm. Sarah knew then Mark was just the beginning. And time was running out. Sarah's hands trembled as she turned the brittle pages of the ancient journal she'd found hidden beneath the floorboards of her grandmother's attic. The ink had faded with time, but the words were unmistakable. "The spirit of judgment does not forget. It waits, patient as the grave, for the blood of the one who bound it." Her heart lurched as she traced the looping signature at the bottom, her own last name. The realization struck her like a physical blow. Her ancestor had imprisoned the spirit centuries ago, and now it had returned to claim its vengeance. Outside, The wind howled against the windows, rattling the panes as if something unseen was testing the strength of the glass. Sarah's breath hitched when she saw the symbol from Mark's corpse, the same one scrawled in the margins of the journal. It was a mark of judgment, a sign that the spirit had claimed its first victim in a long line of retribution. Her stomach churned with guilt. Mark's death wasn't random, it was a message for her. A shadow shifted in the corner of the room. Sarah spun, her pulse roaring in her ears. The watcher stood there, his hollow eyes gleaming beneath the hood of his tattered cloak. His voice was a rasp, like dry leaves scraping against stone. You were always part of the story, Sarah. The blood in your veins is the key. He stepped closer, extending a hand with fingers like twisted branches. The spirit hungers for justice. Will you atone for your family's sin? Before she could respond, he vanished, leaving behind only a single black feather and the faint echo of laughter. Sarah's hands clenched into fists. The spirit wasn't just coming for the town, it was coming for her. And the watcher, its loyal servant, would make sure she didn't escape. She had to find a way to break the curse, even if it meant confronting the darkness that had been waiting centuries to consume her. The air in Sarah's cramped apartment grew thick with the scent of burning candle wax and aged paper as she pored over the crumbling manuscript. The clock on the wall ticked ominously, each second bringing midnight closer. Shadows twisted unnaturally in the corners of the room, as if alive. She rubbed her eyes, but the visions only grew worse, flashes of gaunt faces, hollow eyes, and screams muffled by an unseen force. The spirit's past judgments played out in her mind like a grotesque slideshow. Entire families dragged into the darkness, their sins weighed and found wanting. Her hands trembled as she traced the ritual's steps, written in a language that seemed to shift and writhe on the page. The instructions were clear but horrifying. To banish the spirit, she would have to offer something irreplaceable. A soul for a soul. Her breath hitched as the weight of the choice settled over her. Was she really willing to gamble her own life to save the town? To save what was left of her own fractured sanity? A sudden knock at the door startled her. The watcher's voice slithered through the wood, dripping with mock sympathy. Time is running out, Sarah. Can you hear them? The lost ones, they're calling for you. She clamped her hands over her ears, but the whispers grew louder, merging with the distant chimes of the town clock. Midnight was minutes away. The ritual demanded blood, hers. A single drop to seal the pact, but at what cost? The spirit's laughter echoed in her skull, a sound like breaking glass. She grabbed the knife, her reflection in the blade distorted, eyes hollow with fear. The clock began to strike. The abandoned church loomed in the moonlight, its crumbling steeple casting jagged shadows across the graveyard. Sarah clutched the ancient manuscript to her chest, its pages trembling in her grip as she stepped through the broken doors. The air was thick with the scent of damp earth and something darker, something metallic and ancient. The spirit awaited her, its form shifting like smoke in the dim light, eyes burning with centuries of malice. The watcher emerged from the shadows, his usual smirk replaced by grim determination. It's time, he murmured, his voice barely audible over the howling wind. Before Sarah could react, he lunged at the spirit, his body erupting in black flames as he grappled with the entity. The spirit shrieked, a sound that seemed to tear through the fabric of reality, but the watcher held fast. Run! He screamed at Sarah, his flesh dissolving under the spirit's wrath. Finish it! Sarah's hands shook as she scrambled to lay out the ritual components. A silver dagger, a vial of her own blood, and the cursed manuscript. The spirit, enraged by the watcher's betrayal, threw him aside like a rag doll. His body hit the wall with a sickening crunch, and he did not move again. The spirit turned to Sarah, its form swelling, filling the church with a suffocating darkness. She began chanting, the words scraping her throat raw. The spirit lunged, but the dagger glowed in her hand, searing her palm as she plunged it into the spectral mass. A deafening roar shook the church, the ground splitting beneath her feet as the spirit thrashed, its power too immense to contain. The walls cracked, the ceiling groaned, and for a heart-stopping moment, Sarah feared she had failed. But then, with one final scream, the spirit was torn apart, its essence scattering like embers on the wind. Silence fell. The church was in ruins, but the town was safe for now. Then Sarah felt a cold, itching sensation on her forearm. She pushed up her sleeve and gasped. A fresh mark, identical to the ones carved into Mark's skin, had appeared. The countdown had not ended. It had simply reset, and this time, the spirit would come for her. Sarah's hands trembled as she clutched the ancient manuscript, the words swimming before her eyes. The ritual was clear, but the price was unthinkable. The air grew thick with unseen energy as she began chanting the forbidden incantation, her voice barely above a whisper. Around her, the shadows twisted and writhed, responding to the ancient power she had awakened. The moment she spoke the final word, a deafening silence fell over the room. Then, a spine-chilling scream erupted from the darkness, the spirit's fury unleashed. The walls of the decaying library groaned as the entity fought against the ritual's hold. Sarah's breath came in ragged gasps, her body weakening as the magic drained her. For a fleeting moment, she glimpsed the spirit's true form, a monstrous figure with hollow eyes and a mouth stretched too wide, filled with endless rows of jagged teeth. It lashed out, its spectral claws inches from her throat, before the ritual's light engulfed it in a blinding flash. The scream faded into an eerie echo, and the library fell still, but as the dust settled, Sarah felt a cold sting on her wrist. Lifting her arm, she saw it, a dark, spiraling mark, pulsing like a living thing. The town awoke to an unnerving calm. No more disappearances, no more whispers in the dead of night. The people celebrated, brushing off Sarah's warnings as the ravings of a traumatized woman. Only she knew the truth. The spirit was gone for now. But the mark on her wrist was a promise. 100 years would pass in the blink of an eye, and when the cycle began again, she wouldn't be the savior. She would be the victim. Sarah clutched her wrist, staring into the darkness outside her window, wondering if the spirit's eyes were already watching her from the abyss.